Chapter 1. The great galactic garbage heist Zee Patel stood amidst a sea of trash, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of civilization. Behind her, the space trash squatter team trudged along, their bright orange jumpsuits stained with an assortment of mysterious substances. "All right, guys, let's get to work," Zee called out, trying to sound enthusiastic despite the chaos that surrounded them. The team hesitated, unsure where to begin. Their leader, Balthazar McSnaz, approached Zee, a look of concern etched on his face. "Zee, maybe we should just leave it for the next crew," he suggested, eyeing the towering pile of garbage. Zee's eyes narrowed. "No way, Balthazar. We're the space trash squatter team, not the galactic garbage avoiders. It's our job to clean up this mess." With a flourish, Zee began directing her team, assigning them tasks with the precision of a military general. However, it quickly became apparent that the space trash squatters were not exactly the most coordinated group. Norm, the team's self-proclaimed expert on all things trash-related, attempted to sort through a pile of recyclables, but ended up tossing perfectly good cans into a bin labeled hazardous waste. Meanwhile, Luna, the team's resident klutz, tripped over her own feet and face-planted into a nearby dumpster. Zee tried to keep a straight face as she surveyed the mayhem. Guys, maybe we should just focus on one thing at a time." As the morning wore on, the space trash squatters' ineptitude only seemed to worsen. Balthazar managed to get his suit caught in a mangle of twisted metal and plastic, while Zee struggled to untangle herself from a mess of stringy plant material. It was then that Zee's frustration boiled over. "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed, stamping her foot on the ground. "We're not even making an effort. We look like a bunch of bumbling incompetents." The team paused in their efforts, looking sheepish. Luna ventured forward, a tentative smile on her face. Zee, maybe we just need to take a break and regroup." Zee threw up her hands in exasperation. "A break? We don't have time for breaks. The galaxy is full of trash, and someone has to clean it up." As the team stood there, Zee's words hung in the air like a challenge. They knew they couldn't just walk away from this mess. But could they actually manage to clean it up? Only time would tell. Meanwhile, Balthazar leaned over to whisper something to Norm, a sly grin spreading across his face. "Hey, maybe we should just call in some backup," he whispered. Norm nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, like those guys from the planetary pickup crew." Zee's eyes snapped up, a flicker of suspicion crossing her face. "You can't be serious. They're notorious for their lack of enthusiasm and general ineptitude." Balthazar shrugged. "Hey, desperate times call for desperate measures." As the team continued to bicker, Zee couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get a whole lot worse. Little did they know, the great galactic garbage heist was only just beginning. Chapter 1. The competition is announced. The bustling space station hummed with excitement as the Universal Galactic Council, UGC, made its grand announcement. A holographic display flickered to life in the center of the room, casting an otherworldly glow over the assembled crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed citizens of the galaxy," the UGC's representative declared, her voice echoing through the speakers. "We are thrilled to announce the most anticipated competition in intergalactic history, the search for the best waste management team." A collective gasp rippled through the audience as the implications sank in. This was no ordinary contest. It was a chance for the galaxy's top trash squattering teams to showcase their skills and prove themselves as the cream of the crop. Among the onlookers, Zee's eyes widened with excitement. As a skilled space trash squatter herself, she had always dreamed of joining the ranks of the elite teams. This competition was her chance to shine, to demonstrate her expertise and earn the respect of her peers. She nudged her best friend, Bubba, who was grinning from ear to ear. "This is it, Bub. We're going to enter and show them what we've got." Bubba's grin faltered for a moment as he stared at Zee with an impish glint in his eye. No way," he said, shaking his head. "We're not just gonna enter like any other team. We're going to win this thing with style." Zee raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" "We're going to enter with a musical number," Bubba declared, as if it was the most obvious decision in the universe. A what? Zee's confusion deepened. You know, a song and dance routine all about garbage. Bubba's enthusiasm grew, his voice rising. Just think about it. We'll have choreographed trash-dumping moves, catchy melodies that will stick in everyone's head. And I've already got the title, Trash Ahoy. Zee blinked, unsure if she should be impressed by Bubba's creativity or concerned for their chances of winning. Bubba, this is a competition about waste management, not a talent show. But Bubba was undeterred. That's the genius part. We'll make it a garbage-themed musical number, and people will love it. As Zee pondered the merits of their unorthodox plan, the UGC's representative continued to announce the details of the competition. The stakes were high, with the winning team receiving the coveted Golden Garbage Can trophy, not to mention bragging rights throughout the galaxy. Zee couldn't help but feel a surge of determination. This was her chance to prove herself and show Bubba that, yes, they could indeed win this thing in their own unique way. She leaned over to whisper to him, "You know what? I think your crazy plan might just work." Bubba grinned, triumphant. "I told you it would be a winner." The two of them high-fived as the crowd erupted into cheers and applause, celebrating the grand competition that was about to change their lives forever, in ways they could hardly imagine. Chapter 7. Bubba's big idea. Bubba beamed with excitement as he approached Zee in the rehearsal room. "Hey, I've got a big idea," he announced, not waiting for her to ask what it was. Zee raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite herself. "What is it?" she asked, setting aside the script she'd been studying. Bubba took a deep breath and launched into his plan. "I think we should let me lead the team in developing our musical number. I know we're all talented, but I've got some real vision for this performance." Zee's expression turned skeptical. She had seen Bubba's creative side before, and it often led to chaos rather than cohesion. But she was also aware that he had a good heart and genuinely wanted to contribute. "Okay, let's hear you out," she said, trying to sound more enthusiastic than she felt. Bubba nodded triumphantly. "Great. First, we'll need some input from the rest of the team." He gathered everyone together and asked for their suggestions for the musical number. Trixie, the resident goofball, was the first to pipe up. "I think we should do a tap dance routine." While riding unicycles, she exclaimed. The team stared at her in horror before Bubba intervened, chuckling. "That's not a bad idea, Trixie. But maybe we can simplify it for the sake of, coordination." Next up was Sparky, who suggested a rendition of Space Oddity with all of them playing different space instruments: guitar, harmonica, kazoo, and accordion. Zee cringed at this one. She knew that, no matter how well-intentioned, some ideas were simply destined to fail in spectacular fashion. Bubba grinned encouragingly. "That's exactly the kind of creativity I was thinking we could tap into. But maybe we can incorporate some other elements too." Finally, it was Sparky's turn again, this time, with a suggestion that involved dancing on top of moving segways while reciting Shakespearean sonnets. Zee shook her head firmly. No. We are not going to do any of those things." Her doubts about Bubba's plan were growing by the minute. She knew it would be chaos on stage if they tried to incorporate all these outlandish ideas. But before she could intervene further, the team leader spoke up. "Actually, Zee, I think we should let Bubba run with this idea for a little while. It might just surprise us." Zee's frustration grew as she watched her team nodding along with each other. She knew that they were all swept up in the excitement of the moment, but she also knew that some ideas were simply too crazy to work out. She sighed inwardly, trying to see the big picture even when it was difficult to do so. Maybe, just maybe, this whole thing would be a disaster from which they could learn and grow. But she didn't have to like it. "Fine," she said finally. "Let's give Bubba some time to come up with something that might actually work out." She forced herself to smile. Chapter 1. Rehearsals and ruckus, the team gathered in the community center's auditorium, surrounded by a sea of folding chairs and dusty music stands. The air was thick with anticipation as they prepared for their musical number, a production that had been months in the making. Zee, the team leader, stood at the front of the room, a stern expression on her face. "All right, everyone, let's get started. We've got a lot to cover today." Bubba, who was supposed to be leading the charge as the star of the show, wandered in late, sporting his signature messy hair and a wide grin. "Hey guys, sorry I'm late. I had to stop for breakfast on the way here." The team's director, a harried-looking woman named Karen, raised an eyebrow. "Bubba, we've been over this before. You need to be here on time if we're going to make any progress." Bubba shrugged, undeterred. "Oh, come on, Kay. I'm just trying to get in the zone, you know." Zee sighed and began to go over the day's schedule, but it was clear that things were already off track. Bubba continued to disrupt the rehearsal, making jokes and cracking wise as they tried to run through the choreography. The first few minutes of the rehearsal were chaotic, with people bumping into each other and stumbling over their own feet. Zee valiantly tried to keep everyone on track, but it was clear that this was going to be a long day. As the morning wore on, tensions began to rise. Rachel, one of the dancers, had a bone to pick with Bubba about his lack of commitment to the production. "I don't know why you're even here if you can't take this seriously," she snapped. Bubba smirked and leaned in close. "Oh, come on, Ratch, I'm taking it very seriously." Lie. The team's percussionist, a tiny but fierce woman named Tina, was having none of it. "Hey, Bubba, knock it off. We're trying to work here." As the argument escalated, Zee tried to intervene. "Okay, let's just take a deep breath and focus on the task at hand, shall we?" But it was too late. The team had descended into chaos, with people shouting over each other and tempers flaring. It seemed like the entire production was about to go up in flames. Karen, the director, finally had to step in and shut down the rehearsal for the day. "That's enough for today," she said firmly. "We'll reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp." As the team packed up their belongings and filed out of the auditorium, Zee stood tall, her expression grim. "I don't know how much more of this I can take," she muttered to herself. Bubba sauntered over, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Hey, Zee, lighten up. We've got tomorrow." Zee shot him a look that could freeze water at 20 paces. "You just wait till tomorrow, Bubba. I'm going to have a plan." Chapter 7. The competition heats up. The days turned into weeks, and the teams were settling in for what promised to be a grueling competition. Zee was still trying to get her head around the sheer scale of the operation: multiple stages, hundreds of performers, and an army of production staff scrambling to keep everything running smoothly. As she watched the other teams rehearse on their respective stages, Zee's frustration began to grow. She had expected them to be amateurs, but what she saw was a whole different story. The other groups were showcasing incredible skills, from acrobatic feats to elaborate dance routines. They were pushing the boundaries of creativity and innovation, and it was clear that they were all gunning for the top prize. "Look at this," Zee muttered to Bubba, gesturing towards the team on stage 3. "They're doing a choreographed tap dance routine with live music, and it looks perfect." Bubba shrugged. "Hey, we've got our own thing going on. We'll be fine." But as the days passed, Zee's doubts began to creep in. Maybe they weren't as special as she thought. Maybe everyone was talented and they were just average. She couldn't shake off the feeling that she was losing her edge. "Hey, can I talk to you for a minute?" Bubba asked one evening after rehearsal. "Sure," Zee replied, following him into the backstage area. "What's up?" "It's about my musical number," he said hesitantly. "I know some of the team members are worried. It won't be good." Zee sighed inwardly. She had been trying to steer clear of that conversation for days. "What about it?" she asked, feigning nonchalance. "Well, I've been working on a little something special," Bubba said with a grin. "I'm going to perform a rap song, just me and my turntables." Zee's heart sank. She had seen some of the team members snickering behind his back whenever they mentioned the musical number. She knew that some people were worried it would bomb, but she hadn't realized it was this bad. "Oh boy," Zee said weakly, trying to sound supportive. "That sounds interesting." Bubba's grin faltered slightly. "You don't think I'm crazy for doing a rap song in the middle of the competition, do you?" Zee hesitated, unsure how to respond without hurting his feelings. She knew that Bubba was passionate about his music and genuinely believed it would be a hit. "I think you're just trying something new," she said finally. "And who knows, maybe people will love it." Bubba nodded uncertainly, but Zee could tell he wasn't entirely convinced. As they left the backstage area to grab some dinner, Zee couldn't shake off the feeling that things were about to get a lot more complicated. She knew that she had been taking this competition for granted, assuming that their talents and teamwork would carry them through no matter what. But now, faced with some stiff competition from other talented teams, she realized just how much was at stake. The stakes were high, but one thing was certain: only one team could win the top prize. And Zee knew that she had a lot of work to do if they wanted to stand any chance against their rivals. The big day had finally arrived, and the stage was set for the most epic competition in the history of the Sunshine State Talent Show. The anticipation was palpable as teams from all corners of the state prepared to dazzle the audience with their unique talents. Backstage, Zee's nerves were on edge as she waited for her turn to take the stage. Her team, the Sassy Serenaders, had spent months perfecting their performance, but Zee couldn't shake off the feeling that something was going to go terribly wrong. She paced back and forth in front of the mirror, smoothing out her hair for what felt like the 100th time. "Hey, girl, calm down," said her best friend and teammate, Rachel, as she sidled up beside Zee. "You've got this. We've rehearsed like 1,000,000 times. It's gonna be fine." Zee let out a deep breath and nodded, trying to reassure herself that Rachel was right. But just then, the MC's voice boomed over the microphone, announcing the next act: Bubba and his team, the groovy guitarists. Zee watched as Bubba confidently strode onto the stage, his guitar slung over his shoulder, and began to tune it with an air of nonchalance. Bubba was a self-proclaimed musical genius, and he was convinced that his act would be the highlight of the evening. He had spent years honing his skills on the guitar and had even written a few original songs that he was sure would knock the socks off the audience. As he began to play, Zee couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy. Bubba's confidence was infectious, and she found herself getting caught up in the excitement of the moment. But just as Bubba hit his stride, disaster struck. His amp suddenly malfunctioned, and the sound that came out was more akin to a cat in heat than a musical masterpiece. The audience gasped in surprise, and Zee couldn't help but giggle at the absurdity of it all. Even Bubba himself looked taken aback, his face turning bright red with embarrassment. The MC rushed over to investigate the problem, trying to salvage what was left of Bubba's performance. But by that time, it was too late. The audience had already lost interest, and the energy in the room began to dissipate. Zee watched as Bubba slunk off stage, his tail between his legs. "Hey, don't worry about it," said Rachel, trying to reassure him. "We've all been there, it's just a minor setback." Zee smiled wryly and shook her head. "Minor setback. You have no idea what just happened out there. I mean, I'm sure Bubba will bounce back from this. But still." As the MC announced that it was time for Zee and her team to take the stage, she couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. On one hand, she was nervous about messing up in front of all those people. But on the other hand, she had a chance to redeem herself after Bubba's disastrous performance. "Okay, here we go," said Rachel, giving her a reassuring smile. "Just relax and have fun with it. We've got this." Zee took a deep breath, gathered her thoughts, and stepped out onto the stage. The lights were blinding, but she squinted through them, trying to make out the faces of the audience members. As she began to sing, she felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. But just as she was hitting her stride, disaster struck again. This time, it was Zee's turn to malfunction. She tripped over her own feet and stumbled across the stage, landing on her rear end with a thud. The audience gasped in shock, and for a moment there was complete silence. But then something strange happened. The audience started to laugh. And not just any laughter. It was a full-on, gut-busting, tears streaming down your face kind of laughter. Zee looked up at the faces in front of her and saw people smiling, chuckling, and even holding their bellies in mock pain. She couldn't believe it. She had actually done something right for once. And as she stood up, brushed herself off and continued singing, she felt a sense of freedom wash over her. The rest of the performance was a blur for Zee, but one thing was certain: she had found her groove. And when it was all said and done, she took a triumphant bow alongside Rachel, beaming with pride at having pulled off the most epic failure-turned-success in talent show history. As they walked off stage, arm in arm, Zee turned to Rachel and grinned mischievously. "You know what? I think we might just have a chance at this whole winning the competition thing after all." Rachel raised an eyebrow, a sly smile spreading across her face. "I knew you had it in you, girl. Now let's go celebrate with some ice cream." Chapter 1. The performance. The space trash squatters took their place on stage, adjusting their sparkly space suits and giving each other confident nods. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. The lights were bright, the music was pumping, and the audience was buzzing with anticipation. L to R. Zee, Bubba, and Bubblegum in their space trash squatters' costumes. Zee, the self-proclaimed leader of the group, gave a thumbs up to her fellow bandmates, Bubba on keyboards and Bubblegum on drums. "Let's do this," she mouthed, trying to contain her excitement. The music began, and the space trash squatters launched into their musical number, Galactic Garbage. It was a catchy tune with a funky beat, but as they started singing, it became clear that not everyone in the audience was impressed. A group of rowdy aliens in the front row, clearly fans of a rival band, the Sonic Screwdrivers, began chanting and jeering. One particularly enthusiastic fan, who looked suspiciously like Bubba's arch-nemesis, Winky Wormhood, held up a sign that read "Squatters Suck." Zee, however, was not one to be deterred by hecklers. She danced and sang with abandon, trying to win over the audience with her charisma. But despite her best efforts, things started to spiral out of control. Bubba, thrilled to have Winky Wormhood's attention, began playing an impromptu solo on his keyboard, complete with flashing lights and pyrotechnics. Bubblegum joined in, pounding away at her drums with reckless abandon. As the music reached a frenetic pace, the audience became increasingly divided. Some fans were dancing along, while others looked on in horror as the space trash squatters' performance descended into chaos. Zee tried to regain control, grabbing hold of Bubba's arm and shouting, "No, no, no, not like that." But it was too late. The band had reached a tipping point, and things were about to get very messy indeed. The aftermath, the waiting, was over. At least, it seemed that way. The space trash squatters had poured their hearts and souls into this competition, and now all they could do was wait for the results. The team huddled together in the crowded conference room, their eyes fixed on the stage where the Universal Galactic Council, UGC, officials were preparing to announce the winner. Tensions ran high as they anticipated their fate. "We did it, guys," Zee said, trying to sound confident. "We worked hard and we're one of the top teams. I'm sure we'll be in the running." Bubba snorted. "Yeah, right. We were just lucky last week when we found that alien artifact. This time, it's all about strategy and execution." Zee shot him a look. "Hey, don't be so negative. We've come a long way since we started this competition." The other team members nodded in agreement, but they couldn't shake off the feeling of uncertainty. They had invested so much into this experience, time, money, emotions, and now it all boiled down to one announcement. As the UGC officials took their positions on stage, the room fell silent. The only sound was the soft hum of conversation, people trying to distract themselves from the impending outcome. And then, suddenly, everything went still. "Ladies and gentlemen," the head official began, "after careful consideration and deliberation, we are pleased to announce the winner of this year's Space Trash Squatter competition." The room held its collective breath as the officials paused for dramatic effect. The team members exchanged nervous glances, their hearts racing with anticipation. And the winners are Team Galactic Glee. The room erupted into cheers and applause as a stunned silence gave way to chaos. The space trash squatters were not even in the top 3. Zee and Bubba stared at each other, jaws dropped in shock. How could this be? They had worked so hard, and now it seemed like all their efforts were for nothing. As the team's emotions ran wild, denial, disappointment, anger, Zee and Bubba slipped out of the conference room to process what had just happened. The rest of the team followed, still in shock. "We should have known," Bubba said, trying to laugh it off. "I mean, we're not exactly the most competent team out there." Zee shot him a stern look. "Hey, don't say that. We did our best, and that's all anyone can ask for." Their relationship was put to the test as they confronted the consequences of their actions, or lack thereof. They had come so far together, and now it seemed like everything was falling apart. As they walked away from the conference room, Zee turned to Bubba with a determined look on her face. "You know what? I'm not giving up yet." Bubba raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" "We're going to appeal this decision," she said, a fire igniting in her eyes. "We deserve better than this. We'll show them that the space trash squatters won't go down without a fight." A galactic surprise epilogue, the UGC officials took their time before announcing the winner of the competition. The suspense was killing everyone in attendance. And then, just as it seemed like Team Galactic Glee had finally emerged victorious, a surprise twist shook everything up. "Ladies and gentlemen," one of the officials began, "we have received some unexpected news from the Galactic Center." The room fell silent once more, people leaning forward to catch every word. "Regarding an alleged tiebreaker challenge that took place earlier this week. We apologize for not making this information public sooner, but it seems we've been dealing with a rather unusual situation." Zee's eyes widened in confusion. "What are you talking about?" The official continued. "It appears that Team Galactic Glee and the Space Trash Squatters were both presented with an identical challenge by the Galactic Center, a challenge that was meant to be kept secret from everyone, including us." Bubba's face turned bright red as he realized what this might mean. "And we passed it," Zee said, her voice barely above a whisper. The official nodded. "Yes, and so did Team Galactic Glee. We are therefore pleased to announce that there is, in fact, no winner of this year's competition." Gasps erupted from the crowd as people struggled to comprehend the implications. The space trash squatters were stunned. They had been so sure they were going to lose. Zee turned to Bubba with a mischievous grin on her face. "Well, it looks like we're not out of this competition yet." Bubba chuckled. "I guess you could say that." The team's eyes met, and for the first time in weeks they felt a sense of hope. "You know what?" Zee said, turning back to the officials. "We'd love to take on another challenge. Who knows, maybe this time we'll actually win." The UGC officials exchanged amused glances before nodding in agreement. "Well, it looks like you two are going to have a lot more fun ahead of you." And with that, the stage was set for a new adventure, one that would take the space trash squatters on an even wilder ride through the galaxy.